And then one of our favorite vendors of National REIA, David, with Rent Perfect, one of the best tools on the planet for all of you investors out there that have rental properties, tenant screening, and all kinds of different services. So we're going to be getting some information from Dave Pickron today as well from Rent Perfect. So with that, we're going to do some announcements first, and then we'll get right to it. So I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Rebecca McLean.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Thank you for being with us for our ongoing REIA Now update. We really appreciate your being here, and we know that you have a choice of where you spend your time, and we're so thankful that you spend it with us. Today, with Ryan with us, Charles will then do our legislative affairs update, and he will, as Ryan said, be talking with Dave Pickron, and contact information for them will be displayed at the end of the meeting, so you can reach out to them with the questions that you have after today. Just a quick disclaimer, we will be having a little bit of discussion on some financial information and even a little bit of some legal information, but none of us here are attorneys, and we're not giving any kind of legal or financial advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please make sure that you reach out to a trusted authority in your area that can give you advice for your own situation. We are here to promote, protect, and educate for the industry. We've been doing that for about 35 years as the nonprofit in this space. And we have about 120 local associations, over 40,000 members. And those members are supported by our local associations where they can get discounts like the discounts through Home Depot Pro, which is our broadcast sponsor and one of our benefits offerings, because they give to us some special programs for investors, including discounts on paint of 20% off right at the register, rebates that you can earn, and other exclusive programs like a cabinet program, an appliance program, and other things that they announce on a regular basis that are just for our members. And I have no idea how we just lost that screen, so give me a moment. Lori, I think when you connected, it took away my privileges.
Yeah, the host just switched over to Lori.
So I need those back, please.
Do you want me to go ahead and jump in?
Okay, hold on. There we go. Almost there. Almost there. Okay, so sorry about that for a second. If you are looking for those benefits and others and would like to network with those in your area, you can do so by visiting with your local real estate investor association. To do that, to find the one in your area, you can come to our website, nationalreia.org. Click right here on I'm an Investor, and you'll get a choice about learning more about our association, or clicking on Find a Local REIA, where you'll find those in your area. And you can connect with them and find out how to join locally and be at their meetings to be able to participate in all those great things that they have for you. I'm going to then let Charles take it away. And I'll go back to this for a second while we're waiting. And then Dave, you can tell me when to begin that. But Charles, how about a legislative update, sir?
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. So folks, we are on the precipice of the mid-year elections. This is one of those times where it's full-on logjam. One side doesn't want to do anything because they're afraid they'll either screw up, and they're afraid the other side will take credit no matter what happens. So right now at the federal level, it's logjam seriously. It's more about accusations and mudslinging. Price of mud is going up as we speak. So just FYI on that. There is one thing I really want to focus on, kind of like we talked about with the pets, the companion animals, the support animals, emotional. Okay, it was a dog. But like we talked about last month, look, there are some issues we want to talk about and really kind of dive into. And it really doesn't matter if it's how the animal is coming in one sense, but it does matter to us. Whether somebody is walking it in, carrying it in their purse or whatever, doesn't matter in one sense, but it does matter to us on how we comply with it. It can cost us a bloody fortune. And that is part of why we looked into issues last month with Victoria, and looking at pets and looking at emotional support animals and all that. And from there, we wanted to kind of take a little bit of a different facet of it. And again, Dave, appreciate his expertise is not so narrow as to say, here is just one facet of the industry, but he's got a broader perspective with Rent Perfect. And we wanted to look at a little more the broader issue from evictions to background checks. And one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit, and I'm going to kind of launch from and segue from the legislative side over to Dave with what we're doing with Crime Shield and with Rent Perfect, and what is really going on in the bigger spectrum of things is folks at the local level, sometimes at the state level, there are new rules being put in place limiting what you can look up, limiting what you can find, whether it's on the credit side, the criminal side, specific aspects of a critical, or how far back you can check. All of those rules are handcuffs on what we can find, what we can see, and it really limits our ability to minimize risk on the asset we're getting ready to hand over. And sometimes people don't understand that, we're doing a background check because we're giving somebody $100,000 asset for some period of time or more. And you might say, well, it's only one apartment unit. Well, okay, what's the whole cost of that building if they burn it down or drive out all your other residents and tear the place apart? There's all of these factors that are out there, and that's part of what we wanted to look at. So with that, I want to welcome Dave. And Dave, we appreciate your expertise. We've talked about this a few different times, and we will not get too political today. We will try to stay on more of the issues and such. And I know we have one slide we kind of want to kick off with, and just to give some perspective, those of you who watch, you see some of the updates that Brad posts. There will be economic issues. There are a variety of different concerns that we have, that we are in a changing time. We've been telling you that, and I will mention to you, study wise, we just came out that there are, they said that the smaller investor actually got out of a lot of the rental market and the buying side earlier than the rest of the public did. And it's slowly, the rest of the public is starting to realize, wait a second, what am I buying here? At how much price? How much cost? And we'll see if there's going to be some impact on that, because foreclosures are starting to really creep up, in part because banks are actually starting to process it now. But the other side is evictions and such. So Dave, we may have to go forward without the slide. I'm not seeing it pop up here yet. So
okay, that's fine. Hello, everybody. David Pickron. Hey, I'm a private investigator out here in Arizona. Know a lot about the Arizona market, have a lot of friends around the country I talk to, and it's a little bit different in probably your jurisdiction where you're at, but a lot of things kind of, the trends kind of go the same. So we're going to talk a little bit and start out with some Arizona data. Just to let you know, in Arizona, 1,600 square foot home, single family home right now is going for about $500,000. It's expensive. I understand those of you maybe in Ohio or can still buy homes under 100,000. That's just not our market out here. And so if I'm talking numbers that are super high to you guys, just know that I'm really talking about the Arizona market. But I think it all correlates. So if I say 500,000, then you say, well, his 500,000s are 50,000 or 100,000. Just make that correction in your head for me. Only because I know really well what I know out here. And as Charles said, with this gridlock happening and the blame game happening and winning over voters, we're seeing a lot of articles now coming out about how evictions are way up, how the evil landlord is just kicking everybody out. And so we're looking at that and we're saying, okay, you can take numbers and make them say anything you want, okay? So when you do an eviction moratorium and you only evict people for maybe, cause or whatever you guys call it in your state, we call it like immediates where they have guns or threatening other people. But for non-payment of rent issues, those were really the only evictions we were having out here in Arizona. And I think the rest of the country was kind of doing the same thing with eviction moratorium. So if your evictions went up 100, then you can put the title in the newspaper, evictions are way up, because anywhere is up from zero, right? And so right now, our concern is people trying to really talk about how there's an eviction crisis. We know they've done an eviction moratorium once. We know some political points can be scored if they protect the renters to buy your votes. And so we're really looking and trying to battle, the real data. Now in Arizona, in 2008, we had 2,100 evictions per month out here in Maricopa County. Right now, last, I think this is July, we had 1,200. And this is based on population. We continue to grow because California comes over here. So what they want to say is, wow, we went from 817 a month to 1,225, and they like to use the percentage, and they like to talk about how, everybody is getting evicted and nobody has homes out here. But when you really look at all the data, we're actually down in our evictions from 2008. So if you're fighting any kind of jurisdictions out there, you're fighting local city councils or whatever, just make sure that you get your data and you organize it in a way that paints a different picture. Because what happens when the city councils or the state legislatures buy into this, evictions are up, here comes more regulations for us landlords. Here comes rent control. Here comes all these things that they want to get into our business because they want to be the good guy that protects the little person. So just be cautious there. On a side note, I own Arizona's largest eviction company. So I'm really involved in this. I know the numbers. I know that what the institutional buyers are doing out here. It's interesting that they're buying 25% of our homes in the last couple of years, but their eviction rates are enormous right now. Don't want to name any companies, but the other day, and this is the third month in a row, we did 700 evictions for one company. I don't care how big you are, that is going to hurt the bottom line.
Mhm.
And we might see them starting to sell off because a lot of their equity or a lot of their worth is in their equity of their properties. And it's taken them quite a nugget to run the administrative part of their company. I mean, if 10-20% of your portfolio is not paying you, it's going to start hurting the bottom line real quick. So it'll be interesting to watch them as they kind of come through. They were the ones that bought out here and then went to the absolute max rent. I mean, their rents are like as high as you can get them. And they were really pinching the tenants out here quite a bit with pretty high rent. They weren't able to keep up with the maintenance. They couldn't find enough contractors to service their homes. People quit paying. People, when we would go serve the eviction, would say, we don't even know who to get a hold of over at the company. Just giving you some little bit of insight to saying, I think this is all kind of changing a little bit. We might see some more properties go on the market, and then that's going to bring prices down.
So Dave, let me jump in on that because
Yeah.
there's a couple of things that have occurred regionally and nationally as well. One is while there's Wall Street money, and frankly, when I say Wall Street money, please understand, do I mean institutional money? Yes, but I also mean institutional money that is fleeing other parts of the world and is coming back here to the US. That's part of what we're talking about. We say that institutional money or Wall Street money coming into a fund to purchase here in the US. And some of that is, if you're losing 3, 5, 7, 10% or more, whether it's based on straight negative interest rates or inflation rates that are so high, you're willing to take a little bit of a loss and you'll put in to buy something like this. Now, having said that, I have heard in the last about week and a half here that a number of the corporations, they were doing some discussions behind the scenes and talking with the buying groups, and the buying groups are saying, we're going to sit on the sidelines because we sense a little blood in the water and we expect there to actually be some real discounts coming. And so we're going to sit back and look for discounts. And the discounts, this is what cracked me up, is they said, we expect it to be like, good 2008 kind of 9 discounts. And the bankers all went, yeah, no, that's not happening. So there are tapes that are starting to be sold right now and they're putting up for offer. And these corporate guys are like, oh no, this is gonna come back, it's gonna be real low discounts, and it's like, I don't see that happening here, so.
Right.
There's a couple of pieces out there, and I think these guys are gonna sit on their hands for a little while until they realize, oh, this isn't really gonna go that far that quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see.
I mean, those are smart guys. They have a good idea what's going to happen 6 months down the road, 1 year down the road, and they're all saying now is not the time to buy. So I know why they're sitting on the sidelines.
Right.
A lot of our clients are doing that too.
Well, and to your point, Dave, I mean, let's face it, folks, a lot of what we do is combat management. And what I mean by that is you don't have an office building, you don't have one building. You've got to move around and go from place to place to place and cover 3, 5, 10, 50 units that are single families that you're covering in different areas. And you're trying to sometimes cover cost and all that. Well, if you're in a corporate structure, and just let that sink in, corporate structure, and trying to manage and move through, it takes a lot more time, money, and effort than, this is a classic IBM situation in the late 70s and early 80s, getting outmaneuvered by Microsoft. Okay.
Yep.
We are not necessarily the large Microsoft, but we can be the small, nimble one. And that's really where the smaller single family investors can really benefit as things come forward here.
Right. And so, we're going to get into screening here, but I really want to talk about landlords right now. If you have great tenants and you know what you have in your property, now's the time to protect that investment. If you have to come back a little bit on higher rents to keep your people, you might want to do the math and realize it's going to be more beneficial for you to keep these known paying tenants than to be chasing this high rent. I will tell you, rent is coming down. If you have someone at the absolute highest, hey, good for you. Your cash flow is great. You're in this business. That's fantastic. But if we're pinching people so hard, they're living paycheck to paycheck, and we pinch them too hard, they're going to be one of those next evictions that we're talking about. So really sit back and reassess as we go into a little bit of a downtime. Rents are going to come down. And if someone sees a nicer house for less money, you might lose a good renter. So I think you need to be up on rental rates when you want to raise them. I think you need to be up on rental rates when they're going down to protect your property. We all know a turn is going to cost us $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 minimum by the time you lose a month of rent and do the floors and paint and all that good stuff. So just keep in mind that we can look at articles a day, that just came out that talked about how rents were up 15% this last 6 months. But if you're a really good investor, you have to look at 6 months down the road, not what happened yesterday.
And Dave, to that point, my understanding from even our economist was they are expecting rent increases to be an average of 2% by the end of the year. So the overall average for the year would only be 2%. So if you're in that peak part, and again, part of this is a regional issue.
Yeah.
That means some areas are going to get hit and have to drop substantially.
Yeah.
And by substantially, I mean a 10% rate cut in rents would be like, wait a second, I was planning on that money coming in. So,
and the good point is to know your market. We're going to be a market here that's going to take a little bit of hit. We've just gone up so much. I mean, our rents went from $1,300, $1,400 to $2,500 for the same unit within 2 years. We had people given $500, $600, $700 rental increases of people, all of a sudden in 1 month have an extra car payment just to get the roof over their head in a way. And it really damaged them. And so I just rented out I have 2 properties that are kind of across the street from each other. I rented out one for $3,500. Believe it or not, it's 1,300 square feet, but it's a pretty high end place. And I have a property that brand new, just finished across the street. I put it up at 35. I got 0 hits for a month. I finally just rented that at 2,500. And I'm hoping the neighbor across the street doesn't talk to the neighbors and say, how come you're paying $1,000 less? Because here, we had a market that is heading down quite a bit. So just a personal story there. Obviously, it might be different in your area. Because rents are so high, incomes are getting pressed right now. The temperature of tenants, as we're seeing it, talking to a lot of clients, is pretty hot right now. We just lost a constable in Tucson that was serving an eviction, got shot through the window. He, believe it or not, kicked through the drywall on the inside of the apartment shot his neighbor dead, went up, shot the manager dead, and then turned the gun on himself. And I don't mean to give you a tragic story. He was getting evicted because he was brandishing a gun out in the complex area, the general area at an apartment community, and they thought that he was a risk, and so they needed to get him out of there, rightfully so. And he was a risk, but unfortunately, some people lost their lives. The same day, we lost the sheriff in Oklahoma that was serving an eviction. So for you landlords out there, if you're ever considering, hiring out or having a process server or having someone do some of this notices or whatever pursuant to your law, it might be worth the $30-40 just to send somebody who's maybe a professional, kind of put them in harm's way a little bit. The person really didn't have a beef with the constable. He had a beef with the manager, but the constable just got in the middle of it. A lot of tenants that are not happy is the beef's with the landlord. It's with you. And so that can be a very volatile situation right now. We want you to protect yourselves and make sure, if you got someone that really is just, you're really thinking some bad things are happening, don't hesitate to call your sheriff, your police department, and go with you. Or if you can mail and certified mail, however it is, protect yourselves. It's worth the extra effort right now. People and society right now just have a lot of pressure on them. Wages haven't kept up with housing. When they lose the roof over their head, it might be the very last draw in their lives of, now where do I go? And so I just wanted to bring that up as kind of I want to protect all of you guys as much as I can. But all right, let's talk about a little bit of screening stuff. Okay, so we didn't have evictions for a long time. We talked about that. We now have a lot of evictions hitting the court. Here's the interesting thing, is evictions are very elusive records. Evictions used to find you on a credit bureau. When you ran a credit bureau, they came with judgments and liens. Those came off the credit bureau about 3 to 4 years ago. So you're not getting evictions, liens, judgments on credit bureaus anymore. You're having to go to the court to search them. Now, let me tell you why they're super elusive. Even when a seasoned private investigator like me goes to the court to search eviction records, when someone gets arrested for and charged for a criminal act, in the court record, there's a date of birth. Okay, so we match a name with a date of birth, and we can be pretty sure we have the right person. But in an eviction is not in criminal court, it's in civil court. In civil court, they don't want date of births. They don't want social security numbers. And in fact, they're trying to protect everybody's personal information, including address. So if I go search for a Mike White and he comes through Rent Perfect and we're searching for a Mike White for an eviction record, do you know how many Mike White files I have to go through? John Smith's. Now, if you have a unique name, it gets a little bit easier on us. We're in Arizona, we're on the southern border, right? I mean, look for a Jorge Rodriguez and you have 500 of those records, okay? It's just the way it is. They're very, very hard records to find. And yet, as a landlord, don't you want those records? Don't you want to know how they took care of their rentals in the past? If you rent to somebody with an eviction, okay, and it didn't hurt them, they got your unit, why are they going to leave you whole? They're going to say, I didn't leave the last landlord whole. I kept my money, I got evicted, and I found another place. Why should I end up leaving this guy in a good position too? So there's a very good chance if you rent to somebody and you don't know they have an eviction, but they do, there's a very good chance you're going to end your relationship in an eviction. Eviction records are very, very important. And I'm going to hear me right now. You're not going to get them off of Zillow. If you use their background screening, you're not going to get them off of Instant Data anymore. They are too hard for these companies to find because they are getting sued because they're putting the wrong records on the wrong people's files. And when you have hungry attorneys out there that keep suing you, eventually you say, how can I not get sued anymore? Just take the records off. Now, some of you might have read some articles lately that say America's credit rating is going up. Credit scores are going up. We are being more responsible with our credit. That is a complete and total farce. once again, let's take numbers and let's produce the outcome we want instead of really look what's going on. Let me tell you what's going on. When you take liens, judgments, and you take evictions off of credit, when you now take medical records this year off of credit, okay? When you allow screening companies to only report positive pays, we can't report negative pays when we report our payments to the credit bureaus. What the credit bureaus are pretty much saying is all we want is positive right now. We don't want any negative. And when we take all of that information and we take it off the credit bureaus, what happens to the scores? They go up. But did the behaviors change? You have to ask yourself. I'm telling you, they have not changed. So don't buy that credit scores are going up in America. We're being more responsible. We are just getting legislated out of a credit score, to be honest with you. Okay?
I'm gonna say legislated out of real insight into that credit score.
Yes, appreciate that.
So one thing, and this last week, listening to different economists, Dave, I had within a 2-hour period, I had one economist talk about the fact that we're still $1.3 trillion in savings in US banks. Okay. So we'd saved up 1.3 trillion. The very next economist said, no, those numbers are wrong. In fact, not only have we do we not have that little bit of hedge of protection, people have actually spent through their savings. They're actually putting on the credit cards, and they represented that MasterCard and Visa were showing, and I think it was MasterCard showed it more than Visa, that those on the lower end of the spectrum were actually starting to rack up credit card debt, which means we are much farther along in a recession process than what's actually being reported.
Yeah, not only credit cards, but we're seeing a lot of people get second mortgages. They have all this equity in their homes, and we're seeing them burn through their second mortgage. So bottom line is Americans are spending more money than they're making, and that's just leading us down a road that we need to know about as landlords and who we're going to house. I appreciate that, Charles. Oh, one of the main things we're doing, and if you thought we were going to get on here and talk about credit and criminal and eviction, all this stuff, we're kind of covered, but we're getting there. I know we don't have a ton of time, but I really want you guys to think about what we've been pushing the last couple of years is getting bank statements. Bank statements are huge. I like bank statements because I can see that rent has been paid. Physically, with my own eyes, I don't think Bank of America is going to change that data, and I can get those reports directly from my applicant's cell phone, like when they log into their banking systems. They're really easy to get nowadays. They're really easy to look at. I don't need to call a past landlord and worry about them lying to me if I can see the physical payment every month that's going to that landlord. The reality is we teach everybody on landlord verifications just to ask if they got paid rent and if they got their security deposit returned. We don't want you asking about how they kept the room, all the subjective stuff. And if the bank statement gives me that data, then there's something I have in writing that helps me know that these people pay their rent. And so I go back 12 months. You might say that's a little excessive. I just onboarded somebody a couple of weeks ago. I asked them for 12 months. I get to their last July and August payments, and I said, "Hey, I don't see your payments here in July and August," thinking that naturally probably doing what I do, thinking the worst of it. And she's like, "Oh, no. My husband paid it through his bank account those 2 months." I'm like, "Great. Let me see your husband's 12 bank account, statements." And I did see them, and she was telling me the truth. And she's been a great tenant in the last 2 months now. But the point is bank statements are huge right now. Don't be afraid to ask for them. If you were applying for a mortgage at a rental and your mortgage company asked you for your bank statements, you wouldn't even question it. You need to think of yourself more like a mortgage broker than a landlord right now.
Right.
So if we ask our applicants for a little bit extra right now, we're going to see who's going to give us extra, who's going to jump through a few hoops. And isn't that the personality and the actions we want from our tenants right now? Someone who's going to go the extra mile and do what they want. That tells me that when if a recession comes, if I have somebody who loses their job, they're not just going to sit at home and give up. They're going to go the extra mile, find another job and do what they need to do. So don't be afraid to ask for a few extra things as you're onboarding people right now. Charles, any questions so far?
Nothing so far. We are sharing up some of your information about your different updates you've had on YouTube. So
I
appreciate that.
appreciate, yeah.
Vast resources of wealth of information. So
Okay, so I often try to come out here and show a positive outcome, because I think we get all this negative stuff thrown at us. Charles, you see it all day long.
right.
And I'm in the business of battling that and coming back and counter-reacting these cities and in different ways. So around the country now, we used to worry about, on the criminal end, we used to worry about, they called FCRA regulation. It was a nationwide regulation that we had to follow as a screening company. Okay. We've always had California out there kind of do their own thing, and they kind of say, hey, after 7, you can only report 7 years. So if I find a sex offender in California 8 years ago, I cannot report it. I can see it, I can know it. My client's looking at me saying, hey, give me the best report, give me the best tenant. And I cannot tell them that the person that they're about to move in, I know is a sex offender. That puts me in a very, very tough situation. I have a client who, obviously, I appreciate that they use our systems. I want to protect them. Yet they're shoppers out in California. And the minute I tip them off, I get sued instant $10,000. And I've been sued. We had an apartment maintenance manager who was applying for an apartment. He was going to live in the apartment, have the keys to everybody's unit. I could see he was a sex offender from 8 years ago. I told my client he was a shopper. We paid $15,000, $10,000 fine, and $5,000 for his attorney. But I paid it, and I said, I don't care. My client's worth more to me than that. So here's the problem. It used to be the 49 states did it one way, California did it another way. Now, 49 states are doing it differently, along with 30-something thousand city councils are doing it differently. And so now all of a sudden, you know, Sweet Jane's up in the corner on my computer here. She's gone through hell in Illinois on how she can do what and what's her process, and he can manage. So it's just amazing to me how these politicians want to protect who they see as the innocent public, and they're coming out with all these regulations that are limiting our look and our reach. I've had clients call me and say, Dave, you tout you're a private investigator, you say you get everything, you didn't get me this record. I can't give you that record because I break the law if I give you that record, right?
So
So-
along those lines, Dave, one of the questions to make sure that's being asked is, what can you not show me? So at least I'm informed of what I cannot see.
Okay, so I cannot show you under fair housing over 7 years nowadays. They have a study out there that says if someone hasn't committed a crime in the last 7 years, they're the same risk as somebody who's never committed a crime. I would love as a landlord to see over 7 years ago. I fought that for a really long time. You go back until they're 18.
Yep.
But unfortunately, groups like that, now that's a nationwide thing. So just know at Rent Perfect, you're only going to get 7 years back. Now the saving grace is it's 7 years from probation or parole. So if they were in prison for 7 years, their 7 years starts once they're released. So 7 years in society. So some of your major crimes we're still going to be able to show you that happened over 7 years ago. But that's one limitation that drives me crazy. They cut off my freedom of speech, I feel like, in a way, not to get too political, of telling my clients what I know. And you guys are just going to have to understand that we're going to come under heavy pressure. There is salivating attorneys out there that I'm in, you know, I used to never tell anybody this because I didn't want anybody to think I was doing anything wrong. I'm in 2 large lawsuits right now that I'm getting sued for things that we didn't do anything wrong, but we have an attorney out there. And quite frankly, I think we're gonna beat these. But they're just people that are suing, and then they really don't want to go to court with us. They just want to kind of like blackmail us and say, send me $15,000 and we'll go away.
Correct.
You know, instead of hiring your counsel and going here and there. But just know that this is a litigious society, and if they can beat us up hard enough, we're not going to give you guys the data that you need. And we're going to continue to give you as much data as we possibly can on our side. And most screening companies, that's just not me, most screening companies are fighting like heck to get you the data that you need to make good decisions. I just want you to know that, you guys are getting beat up by your city councils and your state legislature. We're getting beat up too by not only the regulation coming down, but by attorneys that are loving to sue us because of the gray areas in the law that aren't super, super clear.
And
Okay.
Dave, along those lines, that's an area where I've had to help a number of members through over the years, and I won't go into names and all that, but the dollar amounts when they come in and say, well, we could sue you. If you lose, it's up to, 8 counts here at $35,000 a count at this level, plus another at the, and it's just like, wait a second, what you're suggesting is actually one violation that you repeated 8 times in a pancake effort.
Right.
And they said the same thing over and over because they thought they were saying the right thing.
Right.
And so I've seen that kind of thing. I've seen a varieties and folks, when you have to go get a fair housing specific attorney, especially if they do take it to federal court, you start talking, even the low end, you're talking $550, $650, $850 an hour for these attorneys.
But I don't want to be down about this. I don't want to be, you guys are like, yeah, okay, I'm not a screening company. I really don't care. I understand that. But what I'm telling you is if we can spend a little bit more time on the front end, understanding how we properly onboard a tenant, we can get you the data you need. We can get you the information. You're going to have to follow the processes of your local jurisdiction, but eventually we'll give you everything we need where I feel you can have solid tenants right now. But if you give up on this, or you just say, listen, I'm going to rent to the first guy who shows me some money, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. So for you investors
Dave,
on the line, yes.
And Dave, to that point, I've worked with residents, or I've worked with managers and owners who've lost their properties because they took that process. And my point in saying about the high cost of the attorneys is the cost of education to learn it up front is way cheaper. Learn it, get involved with somebody who's good, work with a Dave, somebody like that, and that's going to give you the tools and the right way to handle it. Because even if the termination letter, Dave, or denial letter, if you send it
Adverse action, right.
That's one of the first things that can trip you up, and
Right. So now, as you know, the CFPB, right, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau came out with something this year and put an onus on us that we have to be totally descriptive now on why we're denying somebody. So usually we're sitting over on FCRA, we've got other, now we're having to follow 3 and 4 of these large government agencies, and they're telling us what we can and can't do. Our head's starting to spin, like, who do we listen to? But we do that because we follow the law. We have someone like Charles who tells us this is coming down the pike, and we can help you navigate through this litigious type of regulated business. But guys, this is the best business in the world. I hope you know that. I hope you're all shaking your head saying, absolutely, this is the best business in the world. We're just trying to help you to survive through,
And to that point, Dave, there is a privacy law that's in Congress. I don't expect it to go anywhere right now. Again, logjam, everything. And there's still negotiations between whether they use the California style privacy model as kind of the ceiling or the floor. So it's still up for grabs on what it's actually going to be. And that's why it's not making it out of committee. It's not moving yet. But at some point, that thing probably will move. And whether it's in a lame duck or it's going to be next year, hopefully it'll be next year and we can have some more impact on it and some time to really review it rather than something getting shoved through real fast, because that's never a good thing. But there's those pieces coming. So Dave, I do have a couple questions for you too.
Okay.
So back to the onboarding issue. One of the questions was, do you ask for a full 12 months of bank statements, or are you looking for less than that?
I asked for a full 12 months, 1 year. I want to know.
Okay. And then the other one is, this is a little bit.
Charles, let me follow up with that too.
Go ahead.
I just don't ask for it and then put it aside and say, oh, I asked for it, I got it, it's in my file. I comb through it. Now, I try to stay away from this person loves Chick-fil-A or this person eats at McDonald's a lot, or this person buys this on Amazon. I try to stay away from their personal life. Like they can spend their money where they want to spend their money, but I'm looking for income coming in from the employer, rent going out to the landlord. I try to just stay, I take those 12 months, I lay them out. I circle every month where I see $1,200 go out the door on the 31st. I had one where it went out the door on the 8th every time, and I had to call the lady and say, wait a minute, when is your rent due? Is it due on the 1st? I mean, are you 8 days late every time, even though you're paying it? Are you 8 days late? She's like, oh, no, my rent's due on the 15th. So she actually was early. So we need to make sure we know when their rent is due. I circle it, I get through all 12 months. Obviously, I do their credit check, their background check. So I know pretty much financially they can afford the property. I know that they've paid the rent in the past. And I feel very confident that I have the right, what I call business partner for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years by taking that time to go through bank statements along with the other stuff that I do.
So there is a question, and Jane asked this regarding the number of testers seems to be up substantially. And the question is there something driving that? And the answer is yes. There was a bunch of funding that went through last year that drove some of that. You might look back at some, even my notes out last summer, I was like, caution, there are more testers out there. And these funds roll out through HUD. They roll out in a couple of ways. Sometimes they'll go to the state and then they're disseminated that way. Other places that are their own CDBG grant recipient will actually receive funds individually. And these local organizations will request funds from both the state level and the city level, and they will package that together and start sending more and more testers out. And a lot of these testers are only getting 100, 150, $200 to go out and do their testing. And what they're looking for is that big score, because then they will get a finder fee for that big settlement.
And be the defendant in the case, right? Or the plaintiff.
And they get paid, paid all the way down through that.
Right.
So that's part of what's going on out there. So when I say there's more money, I'm talking like $5 billion.
Well, in addition to that, fraud is out the roof right now. Bank fraud, wire fraud, people on Zillow acting like they're owners of property and taking deposits when they never even really own the property. You send away a deposit, they disappear. You show up to the house to, move in, and it's occupied by someone else, and you're asking, wait, I'm supposed to be moving in here. And everyone's like, well, who are you? Oh, I rented this over Zillow. There's a reason why you should meet in person. There's even tenant protections say, hey, I should have a landlord that unlocks the door with a key, goes into the property, knows it's vacant. So up and over those people that are shopping us and those testers, guys, there is so much fraud out there. If you're not going back to the credit report, the criminal report, the bank statements, and making sure that that person really exists and they are who they say they are. I mean, I could be anybody I want. We just did a podcast on how you can use aliases to get through the landlord process. I can be anybody I want. But if I was Mike Smith right now and you guys said, okay, show me driver's license, I'd have to fake the state out. Not hard to do, but I have to do that. Okay, now show me bank statements that you've been Mike Smith for the last 6 months and you didn't just open the account 3 days ago, right? Show me a social security card. I'm going to make you work hard to show me your Mike Smith. Getting those documents is a lot about your identification too, and making sure that the middle names net match, all the names match on all the different documents you're giving me, because anybody can make up a name and go by any name they want. So part of all of that record keeping and using is making sure you have the right person.
So let me flip the tables on that a little bit, and I call this protective marketing. Google your own properties. Go out and look. And I did this with a recent member. I said, is this you? And he went, that's not me. That's my property, but that's not my number. Right. And he was able to launch, and actually the local police went, we'd like to go after that first. And, they were not able to do it because it was in a foreign land, but at least shut it down. And police departments and such do have access, not that it's quick, but to a Google and to some of these other places, they can shut stuff down. So
Right.
doing some protective marketing to figure out, you know, because the last thing you want to do is show up to a property on Monday because there's an issue, and it's because there's 5 different people all trying to move in because somebody tried to rent your property over the last weekend or week or two. And
Well,
that doesn't
on the dark web, Charles, you can buy profiles of people. You can buy the copy of your driver's license. You can buy everything about somebody out there. We had someone come through, lived in Texas as a landlord, wanted to use this for a rental property, came through, showed his driver's license, answered our questions, did everything, set up a profile as a landlord with us. Now, we don't do a full background on landlords. I mean, if this keeps up, I'm going to start doing that. But we make them pass some identity questions and whatever. So this person passes. Then he goes over, sends himself an invite, comes through as a different name. Then he wants to set up rent pay with us. He puts someone else's routing number and checking number into our system, where this is all the same person in our system trying to act as a landlord and as a tenant. We stop it dead in its tracks as our processes go. We end up calling this guy in Texas and we say, hey, are you a landlord of property? No. Do you even know who Rent Perfect is? No. Yet we had his driver's license and it was the right picture. We had all this information on him. He's like, yeah, Capital One just had a major breach and they contacted me about it. That's probably where they're getting all this data. So even if you get a driver's license, it used to be, we said, oh, driver's license, they have to go down and fake the state out. That's why I want you to get bank statements. I want you to get all of this documentation, because it's hard for someone to create it all, but it's easy to create a little bit, right? It's easy to create one bank statement, but 2, where I have to say my ending monthly balance is, you know, 1,200 and my starting of the next month is 1,200, and make those numbers all balanced. Same with W-2s. Any kind of taxes, get multiple docs, make sure that they're working together, because it's easy to fake out one doc. It's hard to fake out multiple docs, but our laziness is going to let these guys get through our system, right?
Well, and to that point, Dave, Brenda made a point about, you know, registering yourself on Zillow, and I will suggest to you, Google is another one. I keep my companies listed. I check them periodically, and yes, I will respond to when somebody says, this was terrible, blah, blah, you know, and make sure you respond to those kind of things.
Right.
But that way I'm in control of it, and I didn't turn it over and let somebody else take over and run it. And because if you don't do it, it will be done. Somebody will come along and set it up.
So I don't mean to be in the weeds on this, but Heather that works here, you guys know Heather, right? She onboards an applicant, no smoking, no pets. She gets the paycheck stub and she notices on the insurance that they don't deduct $86 because of tobacco. It says tobacco at $87 because the insurance doesn't give a discount for tobacco. So she calls the guy and says, hey, you told me you don't smoke, but you have a tobacco thing on your paycheck. I mean, my point is she's looking at all of those documents as a PI. She's not just going, okay, there's one thing to get it and set it aside. There's another to get it and really, you know, look at it. I would love everybody on this call to feel like they're being, you know, defrauded everything they get to make sure it is. I mean, I hate to be like this, but it is fraud until I say it's not fraud. Usually it's innocent until proven guilty. I kind of want you to change that thought process at onboarding tenants is, no, this isn't good until I say it's good and I've looked it over. So,
you know, that extent that's funny because I'm going to be in DC next week for the seller finance fly-in, and a friend of mine who's been a reporter, he's been a White House staff reporter and such. And in his post, one of the things he says is John 20:25. And I was like, the guy's not a Christian. He's not a believer. He's not. I'm like, why does he have a Bible verse in there? And I look it up and it's Doubting Thomas. Until I see it, until I touch it, until I don't believe any of it. And I'm like, okay, that makes a whole lot more sense to me. Why he would have that. But to your point, that's kind of what we've got to do with this. Until we can look at it and see every little piece of it, you got to consider yourself being fraud. There are fraud cases, and we put up, and Brad's posted these on the blog site. Folks, there are easy ways to make fake checks, and I will tell you, the people who do this are not good at math. they will mess up the math. Look at it. It sticks out to anybody who actually does a little bit of math and looks at it. So there are things like that that you can find and go, wait a second. Oh, what do you know? I can Google this one and it's the exact same picture of it. There's an image of it out there. And all they did was change their name on it. So there's stuff like that out there.
Well, I passed out paychecks here a couple months ago, Charles, and someone did the remote capture. They deposited it through a picture.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, my account starts getting hammered, and we linked it back to someone got a hold of that picture. It had my signature. It had everything on there, changed the account or changed the check number up there. And it looked like a check that I looked at, I'm like, no, that's my signature, but I don't know who that person is. So we went to remote deposits. I'm done passing out checks to everybody nowadays. It's almost like protect your bank account as much as your social security number. You know, do everything you can to protect that, because all I got to do is put a routing number and your account number on something, and I can do an automatic wire. I can do all kinds of things, and we're affected by it.
Absolutely. There's a fraud issue along those lines that we are doing some research on, and Dave, I'll probably talk to you offline on that. Something we're gonna be rolling out here soon, exactly along those lines. So
Yeah.
I do want to mention this. Mark had mentioned that there's coming out of California, there's pending legislation to bar collection of debt by garnishing wages and such. There are a number of states that are looking at different things like that. And when it comes to collections, do you have some tips, Dave, on things to do, things not to do? I know sometimes there are some of my properties, I was just glad to get them out. I knew I wasn't getting blood out of a stone, so I just
So
washed
my
hand and got
tip-
away with it.
My tip in seeing this all day long in my career is chances of you getting paid are very, very, very little. I serve those garnishments. My company goes and serves those garnishments. They quit Jack in a Box and move across the street and work for McDonald's. Now look around society right now. You see help wanted signs everywhere. You find somebody's employment and you think, oh, great, I'm going to tag their paycheck. They're living so paycheck to paycheck. They're going to go right down the road and just get employed somewhere else. So once again, I mean, no surprise for me, proper screening on the front end gets you paid and not in positions of evictions and collections. I think that's where all your power is. Once you get to the point where you have a bad person or someone who hasn't paid, maybe not a bad person, but just in a bad situation that hasn't paid, to get that money back, guys, nowadays is just almost impossible. It's almost impossible. I mean, I would turn it over to a collection agency, give them 40%. They'll at least put it on the credit under their collection agency saying you have a rental collection, and you might get something then. But if you want to, just let everybody else know that this person doesn't pay, go give your debt to a collection agency.
And that may be part of the biggest thing you can do is just, it hangs on them and lets everybody else know that this is what they are. So.
Right. So here's an interesting concept. I talk about credit bureaus only having us, report positive things. A collection agency is one of the very few ones they'll believe and put negative credit on through a collection agency. So go find a collection agency in your area and become friends with them if you have a lot of debt. And I say use Rent Perfect, get rid of future debt, and then let them have all the old debt. Okay. Meaning screen your tenants properly so you don't have that problem in the future. I got to put a plug in for that, Charles. I mean, we got to protect ourselves on the front end.
Absolutely. I'm not disagreeing with the plug at all. Please check out Rent Perfect, check out the screening process. Folks, this is why we try to do this is an ounce of prevention is worth pounds and pounds of pain that you can preserve yourself from. That's why I mentioned, when you start talking about, let me talk to attorneys at $650, $750 an hour. And the irony is, I'll give you an example, and Rebecca will save this one for tips for the masters at some point. In our area, we get snow during the winters. Okay, so sometimes lots of snow. I set out salt, and the idea behind it was a legal theory that had been laid out based on a precedent locally, which said if you walk outside and it looks fine, and you don't put salt down, you thought it was fine to go out. So if you slip and fall, it's on you. If you walk out and you look and it does look bad and you choose not to put salt down, then it's on you. And if the landlord gave you salt and it's there and available and you still chose not to do it, it is on you. Now, if you looked out and saw, oh, it's bad, and you use the salt, you recognize that there's potentially a problem and you've already gone past the reasonableness category. And one of my partners started arguing, he said, but I mean, this is going to cost us a couple $100 in salt. I said, yeah. So you know how much 1 hour with the attorney is? He goes, let's get a skid. I'll just start with a big skid of it. Now we're on the same page.
Right.
And so when you start thinking it through like that, what does it take to take a little bit of education, an hour or two of learning how to do this screening, to do it correctly, can really make a big difference in, the bottom line down the road. And you know what? We had some days where they used a lot of salt and it was fine. Threw some more salt up, big deal. It was cheap. So I use that as an example to really think through really what the cost is going to be and the alternatives could be.
Well, there's a lot of good podcasts out there to educate yourself. The Rent Perfect, we have one. We don't just talk about screening. Talking about screening all the time is boring. We went through, liabilities of landlord a couple months ago, and man, I just got hammered because we kind of talked about, should you allow your tenants to have guns? We just asked the question in the caption. I got hammered for it. And our response was, yeah, responsible gun ownership in your rental might be something you want to allow. But if they're brandishing weapons like the guy down in Tucson was, then you probably should have that in your lease. My whole point is the Rent Perfect podcast, we get our topics off of clients who call us and say, I'm having this problem. If you're having this problem, so is everybody else. So we talk about just being a landlord. We launch them every week. So I subscribe to that on YouTube, watch us. We have the attorneys on there. It's really been beneficial. So we talk about more than just screening, just so you know.
So Dave, one of the things I had, one of my first residents, 7-unit building, had a problem with a door that was, it's a hallway. Finally got it open. We're walking through, doing one of our first walkthroughs in the building. We bought it at foreclosure, so we didn't get to walk through ahead of time.
Gotcha.
And door on the other side opens up, and a gentleman standing there. He's got one arm behind his back, and he's looking at us like, "What are you guys doing? Who are you?"
Yeah.
Well, we're the new owners. This is that. He's like, "Oh, okay. Glad to meet you." And introduced himself and his revolver behind his back, because he's like, I wasn't sure who's trying to trash the place. I'm like, glad you're here, sir.
Yeah, you're near security. Thank you.
That's it. I was like, but all right. So let me transition to something. Dave, there's a question on any other advice. We'll kind of use this as a last question here. So asking, and this is always that difficult thing, asking, whether it's rental references, when you reach out to somebody, what should you ask them? Some things you can't say, some things they shouldn't say. What is it you would recommend people ask of the references?
Okay, I am going to get to your question, but let me teach you what to ask when you're showing the property first. I'll be quick. Okay, I ask 2 questions. I don't want it to be an interview when I'm showing the property to potential applicant, right? I ask 2 questions. What are you going to miss about your old property? I love this question. What are you going to miss about your old property? They're going to tell me everything that they're going to miss. But really what I'm looking for, and I'm staying on the positive side, is I'm not going to miss that landlord who wouldn't fix anything, who was a jerk, who wouldn't take my phone call. I'm looking for that victim, because how they speak about their old place is how they're going to speak about my place here in the future. Okay. One lady this year, I'm just off the top of my head, said, hey, I'm going to miss the big park across the street. I said, well, which way did you come into the property? She's like, well, I came down this road. Well, let me walk you around this corner. Look at this big park. So I use it as a selling tool, but I also look at to see what kind of person that I'm possibly going to be my next business partner. Now you might say, Dave, you have a criteria you teach, you have to stick to your criteria. You can't make subjective, but I still want to know what type of person this is in case I get into a conditional portion where I get the ability to choose yes or no. I still want to know who I'm working for. And the next one I like to say is real similar, but it just starts the conversation. And that is, what do you like about this property? And they tell me, oh, I like that this is a single story instead of a 2-story. And those 2 questions just get people, and just let them talk and just start listening. Do not interrupt them, let them go. They will tell you a ton about themselves. I love to get this because when I am going to call their current landlord right now or their past landlord right now, I already have how they feel about their landlord, what they've said about their landlord, if they're gonna miss their landlord, if he was a great guy. You know, I know if they're gonna miss their neighbors. That's one of the ones I love to hear. I'm really gonna miss my neighbors. It tells me they're a good neighbor. They're not gonna go make everybody mad around the neighborhood. They're gonna pull their garbage cans in. They're not gonna let the weeds grow on the property, right? So those are things I'm learning about people with those two questions, that when I call the landlord, I already know most of that. So really all I need to know is, did they pay rent on time? Did they get their full security deposit back? Those are really the only two questions I want to know. And quite frankly, with bank statements, I know if they paid rent on time already. I just want to see what the landlord's going to tell me. Because nowadays, going through COVID, if they tell me, oh, they paid every single month because they just wanted to get them out, right? Unfortunately, we should all stick together as landlords, but we're going to protect our own backs in the end. And we're going to maybe tell fibs to get our own way. So we can't even trust each other in a way. And I feel bad about saying that, but unfortunately it's true.
Well, but that's why, as a good practice, don't call the landlord they're with, call the landlord they were with before. Because that
Absolutely.
one will tell you the truth, because they've got nothing to lose or gain.
Absolutely. You just want to stay away from subjective. You know, they didn't keep a good house. However, maybe they got in a fight and they don't like the tenant. You don't want to get in the middle of being judge and jury. You just really want to ask questions that you have a definitive proof of. I can show you rent receipts. I can show you security coming back. All that other stuff is just going to get you in trouble. And it's just not worth asking about it. Find it out in another way. I kind of gave you some ideas how to get the information another way. And so I hope that answered your question, Charles.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate it. I've been back into rooms and group meetings, so I feel like we should say a round of applause for Dave. Thank you very much for being here. So everybody give your individual applause. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. Call me anytime directly. You can get to me. I don't hide behind people. Call Rent Perfect, ask for me, and let me know what you need. I'll be more than happy to help you.
Can we really quickly put Dave's information back on the screen again? There were a couple specific questions for specific areas. Those can go to Dave in an email. If we could.
And I shared that email to him as well already.
David at rentperfect.com.
Do it again, so that's the last thing in the,
Yep.
in the last thing in the chat chain, please.
Just put David at rentperfect.com. I have multiple email addresses. I know you guys have all my different ones, but that'd be the best place to hit me directly.
Okay. Perfect.
Awesome. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you so much. You've been a
Thank
great audience.
We really appreciate you as always.
Thank
And this will not be the last time we see you. We've got an Airbnb segment coming up, and so we're hoping you'll join us with that. But
Love that.
always great information. Always great to have you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Ryan, I'm turning it back to you, sir.
All right, well, thanks again to Dave and Rent Perfect. Always appreciate it. Thank you, Charles, as well. Great discussion. It always helps when, our COO is also an active investor and landlord. So getting the questions and the conversation going is always good. So we appreciate you guys attending. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you guys on the 21st for our next Zoom call. See you then.